All right, so team, you've done well on paper. You've ticked the boxes, gone to college, you've got a nice six-figure income, a nice place, the expectations which have put on most modern men. You've done that. But the things that genuinely matter to you are the next level, the next part of your potential, whether that be a career move up or into a different role or a different job completely. Maybe that is a personal project that you've always had on the back of your mind that you've wanted to start and build. Maybe that is even getting the finances in straight so that you can go on and get into property, or maybe it's even starting your own business, your own side hustle. Whatever it is you start, there is momentum in the beginning, but something happens along the way and it just starts to fade and die off. And this quiet voice within your head that you wouldn't fall off the bandwagon this time just leaves you more frustrated and disappointed in yourself. And so a couple of months go by and you start all over again. Now, a lot of modern men would put this down to a discipline issue because that's the general thing that's being said and sold online. But in fact, it's a pattern that's running underneath this. It's something that's not even in your conscious awareness. No framework or no routine or no protocol is going to change without understanding and separating yourself from where this comes from in the first place. And after 2 years of working with capable men, guys who have ticked off all the boxes in every external measure, I'm breaking down in this video with a real case study what the pattern is and how you, a capable man, can follow through on the goals that matter most to you. First of all, what do I mean by destructive pattern? And I'm not talking about a coffee habit here. I'm not talking about being a bit avoidant. In my work, what I see a destructive pattern is it's a part of your psyche that has developed earlier on and it's now running from your unconscious, and it's very hard to see while you're in it. But what happens is it quietly sabotages the goals that matter most to you. Essentially, does this thing stop you from achieving something? And has it been reoccurring? If so, then that's what I call a destructive pattern. They come in many different shapes in modern men's life. And due to the upbringing, due to a situation where there's some form of disruption in the upbringing, especially from the ages from 12 to 18, they are mostly or generally tied to the mother and father complex. If you don't know what they are, then check out the video that has popped up on the screen, as that is the first video where I break down what the mother and father complex is. And this is the second video part of this series. But these patterns are tied to something that was generated and they're just running autonomously. And it's why most modern men stay stuck. So in my work, I have a process. Now, I want to point out here that if when you're working with me, I don't actually label these. I'm not here telling you that's your mother complex or your father complex operating. I'm just breaking this down for you so you can see the methodology and my thinking process while I'm working with a client. This is all the stuff that's going on in the background. But essentially, the first part of the process is understanding the complex, the pattern that's actually running. Because this is going to determine me and how I'm going to develop a process or a pathway for you to separate from it. For example, if it's the mother complex that's highly active, then I would have to work with the father complex because that's its role in the man's psyche. It's to separate him from the mother's world and pull him into the work essentially that has to be done, to pull him into the work of becoming his own man. Vice versa, if it's a more active father complex, then the work is to help him separate from that internal inherited father. Because that separation in the developmental process is to help him become his own man. And through that, then he can develop his own inner authority, his own felt sense of this is who I am, this is what I want, this is who I'm generally becoming, and then developing the actions to help reinforce that development. Now, if you're sitting here thinking, all right, well, which one is running me? I built a free diagnostic tool. It's called Unbound, and it breaks down the mother and father complex, how you were developed and the patterns they create, and shows you where the work is for you, where to start the work. And you can get this for free when you join my newsletter below. Now, it's important to understand that even though I'm bringing these to your attention, the path to working with them is not as linear as it sounds. So the complexes do not sit inside these tidy compartments. They're living forces within the psyche with their own logic and their own way of running underneath a man's conscious awareness. Rarely do I just isolate one and say, oh, well, this is the path. So instead, I will meet the whole man. The first part of the process, I usually just sit down with them. The first 2 sessions is really about what's going on in his life, asking questions and through that, I'll be able to develop a map of how the complex is operating and then what the pattern it's actually creating in the man's life. The man who constantly disappointed himself. This is a case study. And the case in hand here was a more dominant mother complex. This guy was successful by every external measure, second in command in his job, ran the workshop, could perform brilliantly under the rule or under the structure of someone else. But the moment he went after his own personal goals, a loop or a pattern would take place. He'd commit to like a fitness challenge and pull out, or he'd make commitments to people and pull out. He wanted to run a marathon and even tried several times. And he wanted a career move. He wanted to enter into a different job, into a different career. But he never made the actual arrangements to do it. He knew what to do, but he never went on and made the arrangements to do it. From the outside, it looked like procrastination. And he actually said that to me. He's like, why do I keep procrastinating on this? But from the inside, he felt like he was disappointing himself over and over again. But understanding this methodology, we can see that the disappointment wasn't a side effect. It was actually a signal. It was a point to start their exploration of why this pattern was being created. And he had taken on an inherited voice from the mother complex, that the voice that quietly said that he was a disappointment, no matter what he did. So by the time he was an adult, that voice wasn't actually coming from anything external. He was doing what was happening, it was inherited anyway. So it was there running unconsciously. And that's the thing about complexes. It will create situations time and time again until you separate from them. So in this case, that's what the destructive pattern was. He was unconsciously creating situations to confirm a complex or an inherited voice which was developed earlier on. So he'd set the goal, don't follow through, disappoint himself, confirm the voice, sign up with competitions with friends, pull out, disappoint them, confirm the voice, dream about making the career change, move towards it, then not do anything about it, disappoint himself, and confirm the unconscious driver that was happening. So it wasn't just some random patterning. It was just that the complex needed evidence to keep running, and he was unconsciously providing it without knowing it his majority of his adult life. But here's where the work gets slightly more layered. Even though the mother complex was running, it wasn't running alone. Underneath, the father complex was underdeveloped, and the version of his own internal father had been built in a more passive way, which meant when the mother complex took over, there was nothing inside him strong enough to say enough is enough and push back. He had no internal authority of his own, which determined the path for the work ahead. This is why the work isn't linear. From the outside, it looked like, say, a mother complex problem. And again, I do want to point out that if you're watching this video, it's not for you to label yourself in this situation. My clients don't know this. I'm breaking this down for you so you have an understanding of the thought process of what's going on. If you'd only worked with the mother complex, then the pattern might have shifted for a while but quietly come back because there is no internal structure underneath to hold what was going to be developed. And vice versa, if we only worked with the father complex, the voice or the pattern that was running these decisions unconsciously in the first place would have still been loud enough to drown out anything that we were trying to build. So the work had to be both standing up to the internal mother and then developing an internal father strong enough to hold his own ground. The work itself. The thing about this work is that it's not about giving you a framework. It's not about giving you a better goal getting system. It's not about like me becoming the answers to all the problems that you have and just giving you the answers and telling you to go do that. The whole point of this was opposite, to slowly build this guy's internal authority so he can start to separate himself from these destructive patterns and essentially become his own man. He's not being run autonomously by these things. And this is why there's no framework for this. The shape of this work generally is the same with every guy I sit with, but the specifics are different. The individual experience is what's important here, and that is tailored and different to every man that sits in front of me. But in this case, I'm going to show you the style of work that we did. So first of all, re-examining the goal, what the goal actually meant to the man and what he was trying to achieve out of this goal. And this is crucial. This is so important because the psyche is a fascinating tool in which it's always trying to balance itself out. It's always sending signals or having you being attracted to something to say there's something internal for you to work on here. And in this particular case, the guy wanted to join the SAS. That was the big career move. But what that meant for him was important, and that's the key here. It was his so-called path to becoming the ideal version of himself in his head, disciplined, on time, and didn't disappoint others. So in this case, we just built an environment in which gave the psyche what it had been asking for. A live container where he could start to develop and reshape his own internal father and build a stronger relationship with the more masculine qualities that he had not claimed yet. That meant a structure that he could rely on, standards that he had set and were expected to meet, and a relationship with authority which was real and held, where sometimes if he dropped, he was called up. Inside that, something slowly started to take shape. The qualities he'd been chasing, discipline, structure, capabilities, having his own internal belief to go and do the things that he wanted to do, started to show up in the way he carried himself. He was developing and building a better relationship with these qualities live in the container, which led to the next part, developing his own inner authority. Once the structural ground was in place, then the shift was for him to develop his own inner authority, to develop his own sense of this is what I want, truly, not to become the ideal of what this goal is giving me, but it's genuinely what I want, which meant he could not outsource answers. He could not outsource the things that he knew he wanted. It always had to be brought back to him. And making these small micro decisions slowly helped him develop this inner authority. And the final part then was separating from the internal mother. Now, when his own I had finally developed, his own center of who he was, we moved into direct work with the actual mother complex itself. And this is a deeper layer to this entire methodology. This part can't be reached by journaling. It can't be reached by just intellectually understanding it. This is the part where we're meeting that complex face to face. It's not work that you can actually replicate from a description. It's not something you can turn into a 5-step framework. It's not work that you can actually attempt to do without having somebody who understands the dynamics of it and that can create the container for you. But what I will say is the reason why this is structured at the very end is very critical. You can't actually separate from the destructive patterns without building your own inner authority first. It has to be strong enough to hold the separation. Otherwise, it just goes back to running the pattern on the loop over and over again, weeks down the road. Which is why a lot of modern men go and do the work, quote unquote, and find themselves not changing because the structural foundation underneath them, their own center to hold the separation from these two complexes isn't there in the first place. But once you get this right, once you land this, it holds. For example, the result of this process of working with this particular client, once the destructive pattern was separated, once he was separated from it, he started to genuinely build the life he was going to build. So he's now made moves to move into the SAS. He's taken on more responsibility and work. His whole attitude of how he approaches his life has become more grounded, more centered. And to top it all off for him, he actually just got up one day and ran a marathon without intellectualizing it, without overthinking it. He just got up one day and ran a marathon. It's the same man with the same external life. The only thing that has changed is now he is separated and he is making decisions. And that's what the work does. It's not you becoming some fantasized version of yourself. It's very much you being you, just removing the things that are holding you back from an unconscious level. This way you can actually take on and move into that potential. So what this means for you, if any of this pattern sounds familiar, if you have found yourself in what I call a destructive pattern, and it's something that has been running on a loop for some time now, and you're potentially aware of this thing, and it's holding you back from achieving the goals you want to achieve, then the work is structural. It's the slow, deliberate process of separating yourself from these internal voices that have been running patterns the majority of your life, building your own internal authority to stand up and reclaim the center of your own life so that you can actually go on and achieve the things and have what I call the psychological backing to go and do it. And that's exactly the work I do with guys inside my container called Inner Authority Foundations. Now, again, I want to point out that I do not label these things. That's not important for you to understand. I've shared this with you so you understand the methodology and approach in which I have, what's going through my head when I'm working with somebody. The individual path is very different to the individual experience. But essentially, we identify these destructive patterns. We identify what's running underneath, and we begin the structured work of separating you from them and developing your own internal eye, your own internal center, so that the work holds. If you've read this far and recognize yourself in this pattern, then this is where you start. And the link for that is below.